What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers. NBA season starts on Tuesday, and I'm doing something a little bit different with my previews this year. There are some teams who don't necessarily get the national love that they deserve, and I want to know more about them personally, so I'm going to go straight to the source. And if you're talking about the Indiana Pacers like I am in this episode, then who better to have on than the host of the Setting the Pace podcast, Alex Golden. Alex, man, appreciate you coming on.
Hey, Brandon, I really appreciate the invite. And I will say this, to answer your question, who better to have on than myself? Well, I can name a few people out there that know this Pacers team pretty well. I would say Tyrese Haliburton might be a pretty good option to have on instead of me, and maybe Rick Carlisle. But if we're going in our media atmosphere here, I would say probably Caitlin Cooper might have a little bit more insight than me. But, you know, we are doing a daily Pacers podcast over here at Setting the Pace. And so it's really a fun time to come on here and chat basketball with you. So I appreciate the invite.
None of their last names really go well with mine the way that yours does. So Silvers and Golden just had a good ring to it. So I was like, this is the man.
That is a great point. I mean, hey, I'm not trying to downplay myself here too much, but I do like that Silvers and Golden. I mean, you won't find this on any other podcast.
No, this is an exclusive. Like, if you're watching or listening to this, you're very lucky. So, yeah, man. So the Pacers last season, let's go back, because I remember thinking heading into the year, okay, if Haliburton is healthy, this could be a playoff team. Then they make it to the finals of the in-season tournament. A bunch of different moves are made. Huge run to the Eastern Conference Finals. What were your big takeaways from last year?
Yeah, I think last year they kind of, you know, impressed themselves a little bit, right, by getting to the in-season tournament championship game against the Lakers. Them having success against teams like Milwaukee. They played Philadelphia pretty well last year. I mean, New York, I think they won that season series 2-1 as well. And so all the teams at the top of the Eastern Conference, they felt pretty good about themselves. So the fact that they were able to play this fast-paced style and get that kind of playoff-like experience for that in-season tournament run, it kind of spearheaded what move would be next. And that was going out and getting Pascal Siakam at the 41-game mark, where they had him for basically the second half of the season. And you mentioned it, Tyrese goes down, but because they have a Pascal Siakam on the roster, they're able to kind of, you know, tread water a little bit until Tyrese can come back. And I know he was never fully healthy, but that's what's exciting too, is like they had enough talent to go out there and make a nice Eastern Conference Finals run. It probably was a little bit of luck here because, of course, Giannis Antetokounmpo was not out there for the Milwaukee Bucks. And if he's out there for that series, I'm sure it goes a much different way. Even though Indiana ended up playing Milwaukee very well in the regular season, beating them 4-1, with Giannis out there, it's just the playoffs are a different bear, and you could tell in that first game and in Game 5 when the Indiana was on the road in Milwaukee how much, you know, that was a struggle for them, and that was just an unfamiliar territory. So if you have Giannis in that series in that Game 3, or I think it was Game 3 that went back and forth where Tyrese ends up hitting the game winner in overtime, if they have Giannis for that game, I bet you can probably say, yeah, Milwaukee probably does win that game. So, you know, they did catch a little bit of a break, but that experience is something that they can never replace. And playoff experience is just massive. And going on a big run, you look at their Game 1 in Milwaukee to their Game 4 against Boston, that ended up being their last playoff game. That team grew so much during that stretch of time. And so, you know, I think for me, like, I wasn't expecting it. I don't think the Pacers were expecting it, but it was exactly the type of development you want for a young team that really hasn't been there. And now they've kind of found a way to bring in a veteran like Pascal, and you have other veterans on the team to kind of just blend this whole group together. And, you know, we'll see what happens this year. But I thought last year was just a great year of experience for that team.
Yeah, and a guy like Pascal, who has been in big games before, I'm sure that helped, especially like you were saying with Tyrese being hurt too. And speaking of Tyrese, one of the proposed co-hosts for this episode, really burst onto the scene. Was having a fantastic season before the injuries took place. What is the future? What does the future hold for him in your mind, as far as like, where is the ceiling for how much better this guy can get? Because I mean, he's pretty good now.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and look at where he was at before the injury, he looked like a guy that was top 5, top 10, and potentially, first team All NBA. I mean, he was putting up some ridiculous numbers there in the month of November and December. Like, had some, I think he was like close to like 27 points a game at one point, I think in November, and his assists were down. And then I think his points dropped a little bit in December, but his assists went up to like 14 assists per game. So, I mean, he was dropping dimes and just finding ways to really facilitate and get other guys involved. But when I think of Tyrese Haliburton, I think his ceiling is still All NBA first team. I do believe that. I think he can reach that. The thing with Tyrese is he just has to find that right balance of when to be a facilitator and when to be the guy on the team and take over, right? We saw that, he got criticized for that quite a bit in the playoffs, and it felt like this was kind of Pascal carrying the Pacers and Tyrese was along for the ride instead of Tyrese carrying the Pacers and everybody else along for the ride. So I think that if the Pacers want to be the best version of themselves, Tyrese Haliburton has to be their best player for sure. And he's got the ceiling to do a lot of incredible things. I don't necessarily know if I see an MVP in his future, but I do think that he could maybe crack an All NBA first team and continue to be just a star in the league. Obviously, got the All-Star starting bid there at the point guard spot. I think he was the number one vote getter for guards in the Eastern Conference, and he really potentially could have been the MVP of that game if Dame Lillard didn't take it so personal and want to win it from him because of the way Indiana kind of handled Dame and how Tyrese did the Dame time thing during the in-season tournament run and in the conference. I don't know if it's conference finals, whatever you want to call it. Like, it's whatever that is, the round before the championship, I guess you could say, whatever that is. So,
in-season, I don't know.
Yeah,
Adam Silver, please tell us.
Yeah, please let us know. But you're right. I mean, it just, to me, Tyrese has it all. He can shoot the ball, he can drive, he can pull up in the mid-range if he wants. He doesn't do it enough, in my opinion. And he's a passer naturally. So offensively, he's super gifted. Defensively, has a long ways to go. I think he's a good team defender, high basketball IQ, but a pretty poor on-ball defender. So with this iteration of the Pacers, it's going to be interesting to see how he's utilized, because when he was at his best, we saw him as the dominant ball handler. But I think with how teams are going to defend him, this is where you see the value of an Andrew Nembhard who can kind of run secondary ball handling responsibilities and duties with that first unit, where Tyrese can play a little bit more off ball. And I think that's kind of what they'll do more this season, is play Tyrese off ball a little bit more. But I think it's better for the team. I don't know if it's better for Tyrese in terms of his overall statistics, but you got to do what's best for the team and for the long term with this group. So they do miss having a 3-point specialist in that starting lineup like they had with Buddy Hield for a while. I know he was a defensive eyesore, but at the same time, his ability to just do so much offensively with ghost screens, getting open, and spreading the floor, Tyrese is kind of having to do some variation of that while also being the ball handler and playmaker at times. So it's a tough balance for him, but I think he's going to figure it out. He's still super young, 24 years old, has plenty of room to grow. So I just think that defensively, if he can get better on that end and just continue to, hone in on what he's great at offensively, I think that, he can lead this Pacers team to a higher seed than what a lot of people are expecting.
And his Olympic experience this summer too, I feel like that's going to come in handy. That's going to play a big role in his development. You see that oftentimes with the young guys who go over and they're around the LeBrons and the Durants, and they come back NBA season and it's like a whole mentality shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that's why I think a lot of fans were like, don't go because they don't want him to get hurt, because he was recovering from the injury that he had with that hamstring. But at the same time, what an experience. Who knows if LeBron James is going to be on that 2028 team. So this is probably a once-in-a-lifetime moment for him. He grew up fans of those guys too. But I love what he said at Pacers Media Day when he was talking about that experience with Team USA. He basically said, look, I was healthy to play. I know there was a report that came out afterward that he had a leg injury. He wasn't playing much, but he tried to spin it positively, where he was like, yeah, I was the cheerleader. I was there. I was a supportive guy. Somebody had to do it. But he also said at Media Day, to be honest with you guys, being benched was kind of a humbling moment for him. And he is kind of just taken off quickly, right? And he's had a lot of fame, a lot of attention this past season. So I think, his ego was pretty high. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I would have an ego as through the roof if I was getting all that attention and doing that well and things like that. But for his ego just to be kind of dropped down a little bit and put back into reality, I think it's going to give him a little bit more of a prove it season where he wants to, show people like, hey, I should have been on Team USA. I wasn't just the cheerleader that got to ride the bench and be a part of it. No, I was actually, I deserved to play more. I just didn't. And I think that him saying it was a humbling experience to be benched for Team USA is only going to be more fuel to the fire for this upcoming season.
I'm looking forward to it because, like you said, just a great guy. It was really endearing to see him still locked in and cheering on Team USA, even though he wouldn't get the minutes that he felt he deserved. And that can't be easy to make that shift from being the man on your team and coming over and being the cheerleader, like he said. But I think he handled it well, and I do think that's going to propel him forward this season. And you talked about some of the changes that they were looking to make offensively as far as moving him off ball and a couple of different things there that are better for the team. The big story, I feel like last season, the defense and how that was a struggle. What changes are they going to be making this year on that end?
This is the $1 million question that everybody wants to know, right? And I think there's a couple of things that I keep throwing out just to try and make some sense of what they can do, because Rick Carlisle talked about this about a month ago on the radio, how the league is going to be adapting more of the FIBA rules, and it's going to be where you kind of saw it happen last year after the All-Star break. You started seeing a more physical brand of basketball and not as many tic-tac fouls as you saw in the first half. Well, that's going to help the Pacers defense, because if they're allowed to be a little bit more physical with teams, that might help them, from giving up easy drives. Look, the Pacers kind of played math a little bit with their defense last couple of years under Rick Carlisle and Tyrese Haliburton. They like to play fast. They like to shoot a lot of threes. And so they're like, we're going to defend the three-point line. I think they were like number one in three-point defense in terms of what they gave up, but like probably dead last in terms of what they're giving up at the rim. So in the paint at the rim. And I think that is where they've got to find that right balance. What are they willing to give up on the outside and what are they willing to give up on the inside? Because you cannot have guys just waltzing into the lane wide open or with a light contest. You want a heavy contest at that point. So, I think they can find some things there schematically. I think having Pascal Siakam for the entirety of an 82-game season will help, because they just really needed some size at the 4. And before that, they were playing Obi Toppin. He ended up starting. And they kind of realized at that point, Obi's just not the right fit for our team as a starter. They put Jalen Smith in there around Christmas time, kind of went double big a little bit, and the defense did get better. You also get rid of guys like Buddy Hield and Bruce Brown, who was probably a little bit too small to be playing the 3, and add in some more size with Nembhard and Nesmith, who are much more physical defenders. And then that cleared a path for Ben Shepherd as a rookie last year, who really kind of showcased what he could do as a one-on-one defender. Now their big challenge is, can they develop Jarris Walker, their 6'8" small 4 that they're trying to move him from the 4 to the 3 to help carry that load defensively. And of course, Ben Mather, and getting him back healthy, him as an on-ball defender, hopefully he can develop, because his defense has been a little bit suspect since he's been in the league. So I think it's just individual growth is how they're going to get better. They have implemented a little bit more zone in the preseason, kind of experimenting with that to see if they can throw different wrinkles out there to kind of throw other teams off. But I just think overall it's just going to be a matter of the will to defend. And I think it sounds simple, but when you're playing fast, you're going to give up a lot of points. You're probably not going to be a top 10 defense if you're a number 1 offense and like number 1 in pace, right? So I think that you kind of have to understand that. But they did finish 18th the last 2.5 months of the season. So if they can kind of get close to that range, that to me is what I think is best for this team. And it's just a matter of will and wanting to defend versus being lackadaisical and not playing good defense because they're too busy worrying about getting out in transition and running on offense. So you might have to give up some fast break points to go rebound, and they have been a poor rebounding team for a while since they traded Sabonis. But even when they had Sabonis, they weren't a great rebounding team. He was a good rebounder. So as a team, they have to do a better job rebounding as well.
Yeah, because when I look up and down the roster, I see a bunch of capable individual defenders, and I think that's why it's so jarring to see what it looks like on the court at times, because I'm like, man, they've got the players who can do it, but you're right, it just comes down to, do you want to do it?
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, home of Aaron Nesmith.
Love
I
it.
need you to tell everybody how great Aaron Nesmith is as a basketball player.
Here's what I'll tell everybody that's listening to this podcast. We had a conversation in the media room on media day. A lot of us, guys and girls that are covering the team for different outlets. And our beat writer for the Indy Star here, Dustin Dopiriak, which he's a great friend of our show, he just said, Aaron Nesmith, he's the forgotten man on this team. And everybody gets excited because you've got 2 lottery picks in Ben Mathurin and Jarris Walker. You've got, Andrew Nembhard, who was a darling because he was drafted 31st, kind of a first round pick, but he was the first pick in the second round a couple of years ago. And he kind of, took off last year. And then, of course, Ben Shepherd, he was a first round pick and he kind of popped. And so you get more excited about guys you drafted yourself, but they traded Malcolm Brogdon, who they really coveted at one point, for Aaron Nesmith, and everybody said they lost that trade. And then Aaron Nesmith, all he does is he comes in here and he just works hard and he works hard and he works hard, and that's all he knows how to do is work hard and play hard. His three-point shot improves drastically when he gets traded here. He was not a very good three-point shooter with Boston. Last year, I think there was one point where he was like leading the league in three-point percentage, or he was like top 5 at one point. And I thought probably up until the All-Star break, he might have been the second best player for the Pacers on a consistent level. So his defense against Jalen Brunson in the playoffs was a difference maker for Indiana winning that series. They tried Andrew Nembhard on him, thinking the size would matter, with Nembhard being more of a guard, like a guy that can guard point guards. But, Jalen Brunson's a sturdy dude, and so they needed someone with a little more physicality. Aaron Nesmith goes in there, and he changes everything. He shoots, I believe, 8 of 8 in Game 7 in Madison Square Garden, and just has one of those performances. So every team wants an Aaron Nesmith, and when we had the Pacers general manager, Chad Buchanan, on our podcast, he said he wishes he could have 10 Aaron Nesmiths on his roster. So if that makes you that says anything about the GM saying that they want 10 of a certain player, I think that's a great case for how good that player is.
I'm really looking to see like where he ends up as a player, because he went to the same high school as Chris Middleton, kind of following that same path. I want to see what the ceiling looks like for Aaron.
Yeah.
So
with Aaron Nesmith, I do think there are some limitations offensively. He's not great off the dribble. He's gotten better at that in Indiana. I think he's best as a catch and shoot kind of guy, more of a 3-and-D level player. Because Chris Middleton, I mean, the series that he showed against Indiana was just unbelievable. Like, the respect I have for Chris Middleton after that series is just through the roof. I mean, I've always liked him, and I've always known that he's a special player. But the fact that, without Giannis, Dame was kind of hurt, and the roster they had, and the way he was just making Indiana work, nobody could guard him. So he was just hitting bank threes to tie the game up. I mean, this guy was hurt too. Like, he wasn't 100% healthy either. So Chris Middleton is a dog. I wish he could stay healthy. I hate that he's constantly battling injuries. But Aaron Nesmith, I don't think he'll ever get to that level. And I think there's a lot of fans of the Pacers that would say they feel better like Aaron Nesmith as a 6-man type of player versus your starting 3, just because he is only 6'5", and I think he does need a little bit more height and size, and the Pacers have talked about that, how physicality and size is what's winning in today's NBA, and they want to get better in those areas, and so that's why you're kind of seeing Jarris Walker make that transition from the 4 to the 3. So it's a matter of time, I think, before they want to see Jarris develop and take that spot from Nesmith, and I think Nesmith would handle the transition well, even though he might not love it, but I just think that with Nesmith, like, he's a specialist. I think he's a 3-and-D type of guy that can really just bring the energy, and he fits exactly what this Pacers team wants to do in terms of playing fast and playing up tempo and full court pressure. Like, that's Aaron Nesmith, and he loves to go all out 110%. So I think the ceiling can get higher for him if he can just do it at a higher level. But in terms of his skill set, I don't really know what else he's going to showcase he can do offensively.
Definitely. And you've talked about all kind of a log jam, it seems like, at these wing positions, and especially with everyone they're trying to develop. What do you think that rotation looks like this year? How does Carlisle manage all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like there's probably 11 guys you feel deserve to be in the 10-man rotation. So that means somebody's going to be the odd man out. And I kind of went into this thinking Jarris Walker, the guy that didn't play any last year in the playoffs, would be the guy that was the odd man out. But so far, we're recording this on a Tuesday night, the Pacers have played 3 preseason games, and when the starters have played, he has been the backup small forward in both those games. And then in the most recent game against Memphis, when Aaron Nesmith didn't play, he got the start, and Ben Shepherd did not. So it looks like Shepherd is the 11th man in the rotation. And so your starting five is going to be Tyrese Haliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Pascal Siakam, Miles Turner, like you saw in the playoffs. Your second unit will be T.J. McConnell, Benedict Mathurin, Jarris Walker, Obi Toppin, and Isaiah Jackson, with Ben Shepherd kind of right there on the fence waiting for an opportunity at 11. And I would say James Wiseman at 12, in case there is an injury to one of our centers and Jackson or Turner. But, yeah, it's really it's funny to me because Carlisle respected Ben Shepherd's defensive ability so much that when Haliburton went down in Game 2 against the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals for Games 3 and Games 4, he didn't put anybody else in the starting lineup. He could have went with McConnell. He could have done something different. He started Ben Shepherd, and I think it's because he knew that he could defend at a high level. So we saw it last year where Mathurin ended up getting the start for, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 games before Carlisle made that change. So I think they're going to give Jarris some opportunities here early on in the season to kind of earn that spot. But if he doesn't perform at the level they want him to, I think you'll probably see a quick switch and they'll go back to Ben Shepherd as the backup small forward. But it's really, in my opinion, they want it to be Jarris because of the size. 6'8", 7'2" wingspan, can defend multiple positions, probably 1 through 5, if really asked, if he reaches that peak, right? And he has a passing ability. He's got a good shot. It's just like he has a higher ceiling than a Ben Shepherd, but Ben Shepherd also has 4 more years of college experience on him and has that Eastern Conference Finals run where he was a part of the rotation that Jarris doesn't. So, I feel bad for him kind of being the odd man out, but when they brought Obi Toppin back on that new contract in the offseason, it pretty much meant somebody from last year's rookie class was going to be left out of the rotation. And right now I think it's going to be Ben Shepherd.
And speaking of like Jarris being maybe not quite as ready or as experienced as Ben, but them still going in that direction. To me, that kind of sounds like they feel like in terms of competing for a championship, they have time. Am I correct in that feeling where they're like, okay, we don't have to rush and press here. We should just focus on developing for the long term?
Yeah, and I think I go back to what Rick Carlisle said at Media Day, and I thought it was a great quote. He said it's the genius of and he was talking about winning and developing. And that's such a hard thing to do for a lot of teams. With the Pacers, they've really done a good job with it. Tyrese Haliburton just kind of like skyrocketed when he came here to Indiana and wasn't held back as much like he was in Sacramento in terms of just, he was the guy. It wasn't, I'm playing off of De'Aaron Fox. No, it's I'm the guy. Let's run our offense. Let's do this. And that freedom that he has now to kind of run things is really helping. And so they've went out and got players like Pascal Siakam that is a veteran. They bring him on a 4-year contract. I think they feel like they have this window here with Pascal, Miles, McConnell for the next 4 years to really compete at a high level. But at the same time, they want to develop all their young guys. So when those guys probably get a little bit past their prime, now you have this next generation of Pacer players to kind of continue on what they're doing. Now, they have not promised or guaranteed anything like a return to the Eastern Conference Finals in terms of their front office and coaching staff talking to the media. It's mostly been last year was great for us. Let's continue to build off that. Let's see what ways we can get better. And our success is not determined by how far we make it in the playoffs, but how we develop as a team. So I think that they're trying to find that right balance of developing and winning at the same time. And, if they can develop and win at a high level, like that's a home run, right? But it's not a bad thing if you get a double or a triple and you don't make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals. But a lot of your guys improve individually and your team improves. It's just, we know how deep this Eastern Conference is. So it's not going to be easy for anybody to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. So, yeah, I think expectations aren't like what maybe Boston's might be or even New York's might be, but I think that they still believe that they can compete with all of those teams.
Yeah, it certainly feels like maybe a season where the record or the end result doesn't accurately reflect the fact that they've taken another step forward as a franchise. So I can see that those are tough. Those are tough because I know, especially as fans, fans love to see, all right, we made the Eastern Conference Finals. Let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can make the finals this year. But unfortunately, progress isn't always linear.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And you're right. It's to me, it's so fascinating because fans always measure success by how far you go. And a lot of people say if it's not a championship, it's a bust, right? If you don't win the championship, then it was a failed season. When that is just absolutely wrong because only one team is going to win every single season. So you mean to tell me the other 29 teams had a failure of a season? No. There's different successes you can have, and not everybody is championship level ready, right? Like we see this Boston team, how deep they are, how loaded they are. Are they going to be able to, carry that on for the next 4 to 5 years? Potentially, but maybe at the end of that window right there, there's an opportunity for Indiana after having all these guys have playoff experience and develop. Like it took Reggie Miller forever to get to the NBA finals. 2000 was when they finally made it, and he was drafted in 87, I believe. So it's Rome wasn't built in a day, and it takes time to build and get there. So yeah, I think for fans though, like the Pacers have they've had such great improvement since they've kind of rebuilt. They had 25 wins, then they had 35 wins, and then they had 47 wins. So what is a successful season this year in terms of wins? If they got to 50, would that make you feel better about it? I think probably so. So even though it's only a 3-game improvement compared to where you've had drastic improvements, this team is not going to win 55 plus games. It's just not realistic. But I would say 51, 52 is probably their ceiling if everything clicks right. But yeah, they're in a really good spot.
absolutely. And kind of speaking of that development moving forward, from a roster construction standpoint, what do you think they're missing that would help them get to that 51, 52 win mark and beyond?
Yeah, I think they're just missing that true small forward, right? They need someone that can probably put the ball in the basket a little bit to kind of be that third guy next to Pascal and Tyrese Haliburton. And I think they just need some more size defensively to kind of cover some of those mistakes, right? The fact that Miles Turner is their, three in their big three is not a knock on Turner by any means, because I think he's, probably a top 10 center in the league at this point, but you just probably need a different position and skill set to really elevate where this team needs to go, right? And I think that's why there was a lot of intrigue by fans to let's go back and get Paul George in the offseason. That's, one of the things that, Philadelphia obviously knew they needed, right? And if it wasn't Paul George, there was a lot of conversation here like, ooh, could they trade for Mikal Bridges? Could they get OG Anunoby in free agency? And of course, you see the Knicks stockpile those two guys, get OG in a trade last year, get Mikal Bridges in a crazy trade in the offseason. Then, of course, Paul George leaves the Clippers and he goes to the 76ers, and they're just kind of missing that build of player that makes sense on both ends in terms of offensively fitting into what they do and defensively, being a solid defender that can guard some of those better players like the Jason Tatums of the NBA. So that's where I think they really miss it. Jaylen Brown absolutely had his way with Indiana last year. Chris Middleton had his way with Indiana last year. Obviously, Jalen Brunson had his way, but even at times, Dante DiVincenzo went off. OG Anunoby was pretty unstoppable for the Knicks before he went down against the Pacers too. So they just miss somebody. They really need somebody. They lack somebody with that size and capabilities. I know that there's been a lot of rumors out there about who could they go out and get. People are trying to think of ideas, and Brandon Ingram is a name that people have brought up before, but Brandon Ingram to me is not the defensive type of player they need. He's a good offensive player that there's a reason why the Pelicans don't want to pay him a bunch of money right now at this point. So good player. I don't think he's the right fit, but if they could find somebody at that 3 position that's better defensively than they are offensively, but still very impactful offensively, that's the way to go. I just don't necessarily see that player available right now in the league.
Me either, because I was trying to think, both with George and Ingram, you've got the injury concerns too. I don't know if you're looking to move assets to kind of get that problem either.
Yeah, I mean, so I you look at teams that are kind of not very good right now. Could a Jeremy Grant in Portland make a lot of sense? That's $35 million though for a guy, to me, that's not worth that, right? I like Jeremy Grant. I think he's a good player, but is he supposed to be the second highest paid player on your Pacers team? And do you want to have 3 guys on max contracts? Probably not. Then you look at a team like Brooklyn. They've got, Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson. Those are good players, but to me, they're more of fours that can play the three, but it's not their natural position. And I don't think they could really bring the level of defensive intensity you need against the Jason Tatums of the world. They can guard them for a little bit, but for a 7-game series, I don't feel like they're going to scare anybody. So those players are hard to find. And when teams have them, they don't want to get rid of them. So you see the cost that it took New York to get Mikal Bridges away from Brooklyn. That's a lot of assets to give up. So the Pacers don't really have that right now either. So it might just be coming from development of Jarris Walker and potentially Ben Mathurin. I know he's only about 6'6", but if those two guys can really develop, hopefully you can kind of at least mask that hole for the next couple of years.
Definitely. Yeah, I like Mathurin's game a lot too. I know they felt like they missed him in the playoffs last year with the injuries and everything, and I'm thinking that hopefully that kind of works the same way we're thinking Haliburton's Olympic experience works. Maybe watching that works for Mathurin moving forward too.
I mean, it's ironic. Haliburton went first in interviews and Mathurin came about 6 or 7 guys later, but he said the same thing as Haliburton. He said that seeing the team have success without him on the court in the playoffs was a humbling experience. I said, man, these guys must have had a conversation about the humbling experiences they both had, because Mathurin to me was playing his best basketball before we got hurt. And so now with that shoulder injury, having to go through rehab, he's changed his shot up this year. I know that he's getting the ball up a little bit higher. There's more arc on his shot. And when I see it in warm-ups, it does look better. It doesn't look as flat. But if you watch his performance in the preseason so far in the first 3 games, really struggled in game 1 against Atlanta on both ends. Had some better defensive moments, I would say, in that game than he did offensive moments. And then he had a flawless game against Cleveland on that on their second game. But the third game against Memphis, he really struggled, and they kind of put him out there on Desmond Bane, and I felt like it was more of a challenge to kind of see what he could do. And to me, Desmond Bane just kind of had his way with Mathurin, and he's just a little bit too lackluster in terms of on-ball and off-ball defense. Like, especially when he's on ball, he'll engage a little bit more. Not the greatest at navigating screens, right? But off-ball, he gets caught ball watching quite a bit. Loses his guy, whether it's off backdoor cutting or just, helping down too much and then not recovering quick enough to your guy and closing out on a 3-point shot. So it's just little things with him that if he can clean those up, I do think the ceiling is very, very high for him. But at the same time, he can talk about wanting to be a great defender and everything like that, but talk is cheap. I'm ready to see those words be put into actions by him just going all out defensively and not even caring about offense, because we know he can do stuff offensively. Like, this is probably the best driver on the Pacers team in terms of getting past guys and creating contact, getting to the free throw line. Like, he's got a special skill set that nobody else on this team has. It's just the defensive side of things is what's going to keep him off the court, and really it's what's kept him out of the starting lineup pretty much, all of his career so far.
Something to keep an eye on. It is always frustrating to me when I watch any player who is so gifted offensively, and then you see him and defense, it's like, oh, is that even the same guy? So hopefully he puts it together. Speaking of putting words into actions, your words into the actions of the Pacers this year, what can we expect? What should Pacers fans be excited about, or just hoop fans who want to tune in and watch y'all play?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very similar to what they ran last year. I don't think there's going to be a lot of surprises with what they do. I think they're going to play fast. I think you're going to see more of the full court defense that you saw in the playoffs. I think that really works well for them. I remember a couple of possessions where I really paid attention to their full court pressure. It wasn't implemented throughout the entirety of the game, but there for a few moments, it was really important. And it took one of the teams almost 14 seconds to get the ball across the half court line and get into their offense. So if you can shave off 10 seconds by just pressuring up court the whole time, I think that is going to help improve their defense, right? Like, you asked me about how they can improve their defense earlier. Things like that can make a difference, just because you're kind of making the opponent rush their offensive set once they get into the half court set, because when you've only got 14 seconds to get into your offense, you got to go quick. So I think that's what you're going to really see with this team, is just trying to find ways to be creative defensively, to throw different looks at teams. But, it's going to be the Tyrese Haliburton show with Pascal Siakam right there next to him. I think you're going to see like a 1A, 1B type, star for this team. I don't think it's going to be just Tyrese dominating night in, night out where Pascal's right behind him. I think that there's even a good chance Pascal might lead the team in scoring for this Pacers team. But I think that the evolution of Andrew Nembhard is going to be something to watch this year. I think that we saw it a little bit in the playoffs last year when Haliburton went out, but I have a feeling, and this is my bold prediction for the Pacers this year, at the end of the season, you're going to be saying that it's Andrew Nembhard who is the third best player on this team, not Miles Turner.
Oh, solid player. I'm excited for that, to see that prediction come true. Before I let you go, you got to tell everybody where to find you, keep up with all things Pacers. Let them know.
Yeah, I mean, if you enjoyed any of my commentary here, I really appreciate you guys staying for this to the end of the episode. But if you'd like to come back and hear me and my co-host Michael J. Facci on a daily podcast about the Pacers, come check us out wherever you get your podcast at Setting the Pace. You can find us on all social platforms at PacersPodSTP. And we try to cover the team daily. We do some fun segments as well besides just Pacers coverage. We do a hot take corner where we do a NBA hot take and a non-NBA hot take, which can always be fun. It's kind of a little bit more of a talk radio gimmick thing, but it's always good to kind of break up the monotony of always talking about the Pacers and just give you something new to look at. And we're going to be doing like a top 5 list where it's just random every week and things like that, just to keep things fun and fresh. But yeah, if you're looking for game recaps, you're looking for game previews, all the fun hypothetical stuff, we've got you covered over at Setting the Pace. So that's where you can find me at. And I'm on Twitter at AlexGoldenNBA, pretty active over there in terms of live tweeting during games and just sharing my thoughts on the NBA in general. So, Brandon, I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to come on here and talk Pacers. And hopefully I didn't ramble too much.
No, man, I feel smarter already. I'm going to start just regurgitating this as though it's my own thoughts to everyone now. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, go for it, man.
No, and we'll put all that information in the show notes as well, so you can find Alex easily. Man, cannot thank you enough. Everyone else, appreciate y'all tuning in. Please subscribe, rate, share, comment, everything. And I will catch y'all later.